So hello and welcome to the interactive virtual craft fair held from Tuesday the 23rd to Sunday the 28th of March 2021. The interactive virtual craft fair is a wonderful mix of exhibitor-led live sessions, workshops, demonstrations, live chat and the chance to buy direct from all of our exhibitors on their exclusive e-commerce pages held with us. And you can do all of this by visiting interact.handmadeinbritain.co.uk. My name's Alice. I'm a part of the Handmade in Britain team, and it's my pleasure to be introducing Deborah Timperley, who is a beautiful glass artist and creates really inspiring pieces. And today we're going to be hearing a little bit more under the title, the story behind a series of intriguing glass sculptures. So Debbie, it's wonderful to be seeing you today, and I'm just going to make sure that everybody can see us both. So welcome, really nice to see you.
And I can lovely to be back.
Well, it's wonderful for us to have you back, and anyone that's joined us for the first time, Debbie's actually come back with some new pieces. So this is new for myself and the team as well. So without further ado, Debbie, I'm going to kind of start off just with a quick question to kind of get us going, because you're actually going to be showing us work which is new to Handmade Online, and it's called A Dialogue at the Threshold. Now, pieces from this series actually have been shown in Germany, Lithuania, Switzerland, and Belgium. So I'm really excited to show everyone the work today. So today you're going to share it with us, and with your journey from deciding that you wanted to actually change direction with your work, but not knowing what you wanted the results to be. Now you're going to take us through the uncertainties and the ideas, and show the pieces that have emerged. So can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Right, well, it is lovely to be back, as I say. So I was making cast glass bowls, which I felt were original, and I showed them at Chelsea Craft Fair and galleries in the UK and abroad. But I wanted to push myself technically, and I wanted to explore sculptural and possibly conceptual pieces. So I'm going to show you a few pieces and describe them to you and tell you about my route to making them. The series, as Alice said, is called A Dialogue at the Threshold. The forms I use are generally box-shaped or variations on a box. And I use 23.5 karat gold to either draw in the viewer or to imply that the interior is made of gold. And here's a perfect example. I'll just pull the screen down a little bit so you see a little bit more of the piece. A piece very similar to this was bought by the Museum of Contemporary Design and Applied Arts in Switzerland. It's aquamarine cast glass in the shape of a soft cushion, which of course is hard. There's a gold box protruding from it, and a little gold is seeping from the seams, which are external. The cushion surface is quite lumpy and bumpy, which implicitly suggests that there's something underneath the surface. So there's a fluidity between the inside and the outside, and it's this interplay which articulates a dialogue at the threshold. So it's called Softbox, and you can find this on the virtual fair.
So Debbie, you kind of said at the start there, at the beginning of the story, that you started with one particular piece. So can you show it to us and tell us how it actually pushed you in a completely different direction?
Yes, it's this piece which is my starting point. It's a glass platter. You can put your nectarines or satsumas on it, and you'll see this and other similar pieces at the fair. But I chose it because it has this very interesting central area, which I thought I could develop. So it has a polished upper surface and a textured underneath to that, which you can hear. And there's a cast black glass four-sided box underneath and a black circle. And sitting on top of the black circle is 23.5 karat gold. it's very three-dimensional because the gold is quite far beneath the surface. So this was the area that I thought I really like this. I asked myself a lot of questions about it, and then I set off to do some research.
So you've told me in the past that you've taken your research along several different lines. Now I believe you started off here in London at the British Museum.
I did, and I'll start by showing you a piece that came directly from my early research, which is this one here. So it's a very architectural black glass box with a grids on the outside, and inside there's vertical texturing that leads you down to a gold base. And here again, I'm using grids to suggest a grille, which prevents further access. The base is about a third of the way up. So there's a suggestion that the whole of the base is solid gold. It's called Defining Edge. And if I show it to you, maybe you'll be able to see that that edge is really very highly polished, and it's got sort of lovely qualities to the edges. They're not just straight. So that's why it's called Defining Edge, because it is the edge between the inside and the outside. Now, the interesting thing about my day at the British Museum was that I arrived full of optimism. I didn't know what it was that I wanted to find, and I didn't know whether I found it. But certainly by the end of the day, I thought that I'd forgotten how to draw. And it was really one of those days where I just felt like having a little cry in the loo. And I felt very sort of lacking confidence on that day. But when I got home and I looked at my sketchbooks, I found that everything that I'd lit upon actually had an interior. It had an inside. So what I'd looked at during the day was sort of objects with entrances, things that kind of had windows that were perhaps obscured by a grille, stone tablets with envelopes and seals, because remember, this is the British Museum. Reliquaries containing precious things and perhaps secret compartments, and relics which were encased. So everything had this idea of an interior that you didn't necessarily know exactly what was inside. And one of the ways I work is I make a lot of models. So this is an example of a model that I made at the time. It was from a ready-made black box. So I cut an opening that's kind of arched, almost like a church or an entrance, an archway. And then I did a curve of gold paper. And then into that, I pierced a little hole to give you the idea that there was an inside and perhaps a further inside. And then on the rear, I did another sort of variation on that idea, but with an oblong of gold to draw you in. And that work, and I obviously did a few more models as well, took me into another piece, which I'll show you here. Again, based on, I'll just put the screen down so you can see it, not me. And this is, again, a ready-made box around which I've wrapped fabric, and it's in a lovely shade of lapis blue. And my interior is sort of cube-shaped, which you can see I'm putting my finger inside, and there's a circle of gold with a grille. So I made, to go inside this, a very simple cube which I polished, six-sided cube, and you can't believe how long it takes to make a cast glass cube or polished like that. And so I popped in, as I planned when I was making it, I popped it into the center here. And then, to my joy and delight, you not only saw the circle of gold, but it reflected into the sides and into the corners. So I was absolutely delighted about that. So I called it Contained Dialogue. And because it really did have this lovely sense of drawing you in, almost as though there was a labyrinth of gold inside. And I hope you can see that, but you'll see good pictures of this on the virtual fair. The images do really convey it.
So, Debbie, you said earlier, the inspiration comes from several sources, and you mentioned actually Islamic architecture. So when we chatted earlier, you kind of brought that up. How has that, kind of weaved its way in now, to your work?
Well, I did a lot of reading, yes, Islamic and Yemeni architecture. And there was something which really intrigues me about Islamic dwellings. They're sometimes called introverted forms, as they reveal very little to the outside, tending to be simple geometric forms. But the inside may be an exquisitely decorated world. So this piece, I'll just move the screen down. This piece is called Enclosure, and I wanted it to have a very strong architectural feel. So I'll just rotate it all the way around, and it's really quite austere. There's some texture on the outside, but it doesn't give away very much. But there is a little gold just seeping through here and there. You can't really see the inside from this orientation. There's just little slits. But they don't reveal very much. So it's made to be viewed from the top, because a lot of Islamic dwellings, their top floor is open, and that's where family life takes place. And you can see that I've used a grid again to suggest impenetrability, and that's about a third of the way up. And you can see that here I've also polished the edge between the inside and the outside.
That's wonderful. Kind of talking about, inspiration. Actually, do you find the work of other artists helps or inspires you?
Absolutely, but it's for this series, it's been more for their writing than their physical work. And Andy Goldsworthy is a really good example. Now, he's completely different to me. He works in the landscape, mostly sculptures. And he made a cycle of pieces called Enclosure, which were about boundaries based on sheep enclosures. But he said, and this is more or less a quote from him, that by enclosing or framing a space, the interior seems more intense and you are drawn to look inside. And that reading that was a light bulb moment for me. And that's when I really decided that I wanted to focus on this, on the threshold between the inside and the outside. That was really going to be my focus. And here's a model which I haven't yet made in glass, so you can ignore the colours. It's just fabric I had to hand. But this is where so it's just a cube of quite ribbed fabric, but the inside is kind of spilling out with this wonderful sort of fabric. It's almost sort of oozing out. It's a bit like something you might encounter on Doctor Who. So it really does sort of blur a division between the inside and the outside. So I love making models. If I've got a day playing with sort of boxes and fabric and so on, I find that I can work really imaginatively with textured fabrics and so on. And for me, well, certainly for this work, it really does replace drawing.
So it sounds like actually you've got like a head full of ideas kind of brimming over the top. But how does that actually lead you, into what you're actually going to cast in glass? Because in terms of shape, what would you use?
Well, my inspiration comes from quite a variety. So each piece is really fairly different in terms of my inspiration. This, you can probably easily imagine what the fabric model was like that I created for this piece called Pushed Back. It's actually I'm just holding it vertically, but it actually displays horizontally. So I'll just put it down so that you can see it as it would be displayed. So it's in this wonderful lapis coloured glass. And it's loosely based on the idea of pulling the top edge back from a bag to reveal a golden interior. And you can see I use lots of fabric in my work. So the outside is cast from Hessian. This is a lovely sort of uneven sort of ribbed fabric. And then, of course, there's all these sort of lumps and bumps that suggest that there's something underneath the surface and it's possibly full of gold. I love the incidence in the surface using fabrics. That's why I use them. So things like the seams, the stray threads, the selved edge, the folds, the wrinkles, the crinkles. I find them very quite visually poetic.
It's really lovely. I have to interject and say it's probably one of my favourite pieces that we have there. The blue is just just astounding. I just want to go and touch it.
It's that lapis blue. I think Michelangelo used it in the Sistine Chapel when he was painting, you know, grand lapis. It really is absolutely gorgeous.
It's a beautiful piece. I mean, you've told us so much about your inspiration, you know, and the journey. But can you actually tell us a little bit about how you make them?
Yes, I can. Well, they're all cast, and they have at least one firing in the kiln. Some have up to 3 firings for different elements. So an interesting one is this called surface barrier. I'll just touch screen again. So this was quite complicated to make. I'll show it. So that's the top. So I'm using the grill again, and you'll be able to see, I hope, all the way the fabric is wrapped around the piece. So first I made a model using a ready-made box. I covered it in the fabric, as you can see, with all these sort of lovely patterns forming. And then I used some sort of wrinkled fabric at the top, and then I glued the grid that I'd already made in the black glass rods. And then I cast it in plaster. So I got my model, I cast it in a plaster, kind of quite a big block like that, by kind of a bit higher than, just a bit higher than the piece. And then I put some in, so then once I'd cast it all in plaster, I pulled out the cardboard box and the fabric and everything. So I'm left with a plaster cube with a recess inside, which is holding these black rods, which I'd already included. And then I fired it with a little bit of clear glass, which is the little bit at the top here, so it was just in the kiln for a couple of days because there wasn't very much glass in there. Then I took it carefully out of the kiln because by that time the plaster is dry, so it's a little bit fragile. And then on top of so this is this way up. So on top of the clear glass, I then put a sheet of silver, which you can't see very clearly in this, but it does give the clear glass a certain iridescence. And then on top of the silver, I put chunks of this white opaque glass. And because when it's in chunks, it's too much for the recess, I also sort of had to build a crucible at the top of the mold, so that the glass could all sit in there, and then it all cast and melted, fully melts in the kiln, it becomes molten. And that was in the kiln for 6 days. And then when it's completely cold, absolutely cold, because any thermal shock can make it crack, I break away the mold. So all my pieces, I break away the mold so that all one-offs, and then I do some cold working on the base. So the method actually depends, they're all slightly different. So the method will vary slightly depending on the piece. This piece is what you call open cast, but something like Enclosure is lost wax cast. And so that's, there's no simple way of doing the lost wax casting. They're always really complicated pieces to make, and there's always an element of that things can go wrong, and you know, so my heart's always in my mouth when I'm sort of breaking away the mold, because they don't always work. And then once they're fired, then I do some cold working and polishing. I try not to do too much of that, as it's the least favorite part of the process for me.
I think I've got one more question before I open it to the floor. But you know, for me, I kind of, you know, talked about my favourite pieces. But more importantly, what is your favourite piece and why?
Well, one of my favourites really is the one I showed at the beginning, which was the Aquamarine Cushion with the gold box sort of thrusting outside. I've got another one that is similar to that, which is this. So it's another cushion form, but it's in black, with a gold box kind of thrusting out of the surface. And you can see the shape of the the geometric shape of the gold, 23.5 carat gold box that is peeping through, and fabric is turned back. So that's sort of described really well. And I like it because it's got the suggestion of the very much this, something happening under the surface of the cushion. So there's the sort of lumpy, bumpy surface. The seams are external, so there's that sort of interplay between the inside and the outside. So I feel that does convey a lot of the things that I'm aiming to with this series of work called A Dialogue at the Threshold. Yes, so I hope that explains my fascination with the work. I always look forward to making a new piece because they're all different about the same thing, but they each of them have a journey. And all the pieces that you've seen are on at the virtual fair.
No, that's great, Louis. Thank you very much for talking through. We've actually had a really lovely question come in, and you kind of touched upon this actually very recently. Kind of when you're kind of taking away, the plaster or the cast. We've got a wonderful question. Do these pieces actually turn out the way that you planned, or were there any pleasant or disappointing surprises?
Certainly, I've had ones that really haven't cast properly, where they're quite complex, like these. They might look simple geometric forms, but that took me an awful long time to really work out the technicalities of the mold making. So I suppose in a way that I really do love the mold making. I mean, it's not very glamorous, but I do spend a lot of time with buckets of plaster. But I certainly didn't get that quite right at first because I had to cast the base first separately with the gold, and then I built onto it wax walls that I textured just on the one side, and then I wanted to learn how I could make texture on both sides, so that there were quite a few pieces that really didn't, they were just pieces that I made that were part of my journey. So yeah, I made some mistakes, but the really great surprise that I absolutely loved was this, getting this reflection, which was so much about what my work is about, but I just had not anticipated that. So if you can imagine my absolute delight when I put in, the two together, and then, an extra something happens. That was a joy.
We've got a little technical question that's come in, but one kind of certainly with that piece that you just showed to us there. But how do you actually apply the gold? Is that a trade secret, or is it something that you can divulge a little further?
No, I can tell you. I fire it in with the piece, so it's absolutely an integral part of the piece. So if I just show you this black one that's here now, so it looks pretty much as though there is a whole gold ingot inside. Well, I mean, clearly there's not. It would be far too expensive. So I use quite a very thick type of gold leaf that I can actually cut to shape, and then I make a little practice piece first, sort of with graph paper and whatever, and then maybe in a stiffer sort of I can't think of the word for it, so never mind. But then I make it so I can actually make this in gold, and then I cut the gold and I put it inside my mold in the recess, and I hope, and this is, I really have fingers crossed then, that as all the glass flows, because it's at the top temperature for about 5 hours, so it is molten glass, I just hope that it won't move the gold, and that the gold will stay exactly in situ as it has stayed here and in all the other pieces. But sometimes it does move, and then the piece is ruined, because it's just no good if it moves and it suddenly was to pop up, sort of over here in a bit of a scramble. That's just ruined. So, but there's more joys than there are tears.
There's always that nervousness kind of opening, a kiln or opening sort of mold, kind of what's going to happen. But it really sounds like you've got a really kind of strong vision for what you want to achieve and what's
So the
good for
pieces
you.
do, because I do really think about because I'm always working the pieces, my statement, kind of together. Happy accidents do happen, and sometimes pieces work really successfully, and the odd time there's a piece that just doesn't hit the mark.
So you're actually supporting us with an auction piece. So for everyone that's joining, the auction is the first time that Handmade in Britain are doing auction, and we're actually doing the proceeds towards business development of emerging craftswomen. Now, Debbie, tell us just briefly a little bit about the piece that you've put forward for the auction.
Okay, well, this is the piece which is it's part of the same sort of series of work as the piece I showed you at the beginning, which, just in case you've forgotten, is that one. So this is a glass platter, which you can use either in you can use it decoratively, or you can use it in your dining room for fruit or whatever. So what it is, it's got the polished surface, and then on the underside is the texture. And then it's got a base, which is kind of on a plinth, which you can see there. And that is orange amber glass with lots of tiny pieces of 23.5 carat gold filed within it. So I made the base first, and then I refiled the base with in a mold, with the clear glass on top, and then polish the edges on 6 different grits and a cork belt, so that it has an absolutely full shine. And
I was going to say, actually, is there anything that's kind of inspired that middle piece, because it's beautiful with those flecks of gold?
Well, thank you. Yes. Well, my father's a jeweler. And this is a ring that he made for my mother, which I think you can possibly see as I turn it around. And so he's keen on triplicate opals, and so am I, because I've seen quite a lot of them. And so I just suddenly thought, or maybe not suddenly, but I mulled it over, and I was thinking, I thought I could do something like that in glass, but without trying to replicate an opal. Exactly. So that was the idea sort of behind mixing the gold and the coloured glass. And quite often I do it with black glass. There's one on the Virtual Fair website. Yes, so it's interesting where inspiration comes from, very different to my body of work I've just been talking about. But yes, so I'm very keen on opals. So this piece then is my interpretation of a triplicate opal.
Debbie, could you just hold that opal just a little bit closer to the camera, because you were kind enough to show me earlier, and just the colours that come from that are just beautiful. Gosh, it looks like a fire, like a volcano. It actually reminds me of Iceland at the moment, if I may say so. But it's just beautiful, just a beautiful stone.
Local. Yes. I think my mother was very pleased when my father made it for her.
Oh, well, that's very, very kind. Thank you so much. We are now coming to the end of our live session with Debbie. So, Debbie, first of all, thank you so much for your time. It's been so lovely to run through the collection and to hear the story and those inspirations behind. It's so lovely, certainly for me and for all the attendees. Because when you put those stories together, we can actually see where those ideas have come from, visualize, I should say, and really push it to to your interpretation, but see kind of bits that have been pulled out from your research. So thank you. It kind of lifts, and we can all look at your collection in a new way, kind of hearing the story behind. So once again, thank you very much for sharing that with us.
Well, thank you. It was a delight to share it with you.